Welcome to Pacific Unitarian Church. My name is Judy Carter, and I'm your worship associate today. We're pleased to remember and honor that this beautiful sanctuary stands on the tribal lands of the Tongva people. We represent progressive religious thought in South Bay, and we welcome people of all creeds, races, sexual orientations, and gender identities. If you're new, we want you to know we have childcare for preschoolers, and we have religious education for school-age kids. Religious education begins right after the children's moment. We also invite you to join us for brunch. If this happens to be your very first time to visit us, we offer you lunch for free. Otherwise, it's just $5. We have a few announcements. Today, we have a UU 101. It has several names, but that's one of the names. In the library at noon, you can just bring your lunch in there. If you're interested in knowing more about our congregation's history and the denomination's history worldwide, our minister will be with us, and it will be an informative session starting at noon in the library. You're welcome, whether you're new or not. Also, the Day of the Dead, or the Ofrenda altar, is being prepared on Saturday, October 26th, from 12 until 4. You're invited to bring photos or mementos of those that you have loved that have passed away. Help donate and help decorate with others on this Saturday. The South Bay Chamber Concert Series is here today at 3 o'clock. It's free, and you're invited to join. And we were asked to announce the death of one of our members, Rose Curtis, on Thursday, October 10th. She had been a member here for many years, as well as her husband. Her late husband was Chuck, and he was a choir member. And one more announcement, Social Justice Zoom meeting tomorrow at 5 o'clock. If you're interested, see Kiki for information. She's right back here. Kiki, wave your hand. There you go. Okay. Now it's time for our chalice lighting. This is a short reading by Jonathan Gottschall. We are, as a species, addicted to stories. Even when the body goes to sleep, the mind stays up all night, telling itself stories.
Good morning. I just wanted to make sure that was all the way out. There's a little spark on it. Yeah, that was a great quote. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, everybody. And for our call to worship this morning, I'm Joshua, by the way, the pastor. I'm going to read a poem by Lucille Clifton. It's very, very short. And she calls it, "Why Some People Be Mad at Me Sometimes," by Lucille Clifton. They ask me to remember, but they want me to remember their memories. And I keep on remembering mine. Let us worship together this morning, calling up the sacred and the spiritual in the question, why do we tell the stories? And with that, please rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 201, Glory, Glory.
Glory, glory, hallelujah, since I feel like shouting, hallelujah, since I laid my burden down. Feel like shouting, hallelujah, since I laid my burden down. Oh, life is sweeter, so much sweeter, since I laid my burden down. Life is sweeter, it's so much sweeter, since I laid my burden down. Feel like dancing, hallelujah, since I laid my burden down. Feel like dancing, hallelujah, since I laid my burden down. Love is shining all around me, since I laid my burden down. Love is shining all around me, since I laid my burden down.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Carl, coordinator of religious education, and I'd like to invite the children or those who are young at heart who would like to come sit down and hear a story. Hello. Okay. I'll tell a story about a little girl named Ruby Bridges. When Ruby Bridges was 6 years old and in the first grade, she went to a new school called William Frantz Elementary School in the city of New Orleans in the state of Louisiana. And just like other children, Ruby was nervous about the first day of school. She knew everything was going to be different. A new building, new teachers, new rules, new friends, hopefully. And unlike other children, Ruby didn't go to school by walking or riding in her parents' car or riding in a school bus. Ruby went to school riding in a police car, followed by people from her neighborhood to keep her safe. Ruby walked to the front door of her school surrounded by 4 tall men who had guns and wore armbands with the words U.S. Marshal on their sleeve. Because Ruby wasn't like the other children at William Frantz Elementary School, because she was the only African-American child in the entire school, and some people didn't think she should be there. You see, Ruby started first grade in 1960, which was over 60 years ago. Back then, in some parts of the United States, children with different skin colors went to different schools. There were schools for children for dark skin, and there were schools for children with light skin. That was called segregation. Some people liked segregation, but many people knew it wasn't fair. The schools for white children always had more books, better buildings, and lots more of everything than the schools for black children. And because of that, our government made a law saying that all children, no matter what color they were, had to go to the same school, and that was called integration. The parents at William Frantz Elementary School who liked segregation did not like integration. Because Ruby had dark skin, they thought she didn't belong at the school, and some of them kept their children home from school and away from her. So much so that Ruby was the only child in her class. It was you. And her father would say, "You're my brave little girl." And they would all say, "I love you" to each other. Every day, her neighbors would surround the police car that Ruby was riding in, and the 4 marshals would surround her as she walked through the crowd of angry people to keep her safe. And every day, Ruby would say a prayer, but not for herself. she would pray to God that the angry people who were yelling at her would change their minds and that God would forgive them. When Ruby Bridges was surrounded by hate, she surrounded everyone with love. And after a while, it worked. The next year, when Ruby Bridges was 7 years old and starting the second grade, the angry crowd of people wasn't there. She didn't have to ride in a police car. There were no U.S. Marshals surrounding her. White people did not keep their children home from William Frantz Elementary School, even though Ruby was there. When Ruby went into her classroom on the first day of second grade, there were 20 other children in her class. Yay! And some of them had dark skin just like her. Some of them would be her friends. Integration had happened, and William Frantz Elementary School was a school for all children. 50 years ago, Ruby Bridges helped integrate a school, and integration helped make our country more fair for everyone. Today, Ruby Bridges is all grown up.
Is increased with company. Please increased with company. Please line up to receive a candle. You may light a candle in silence or share a brief personal announcement.
And I light this candle for all the joys and sorrows that remain unsaid. I know it's not easy to speak them out loud. Sometimes we hold them in our hearts, but they're there. And so I light this candle for all the joys and sorrows that remain unsaid. And let us take a moment of silence. It's a bit of an emotional roller coaster to hear a joy followed by a sorrow, especially extreme ones. So let's hold those in our hearts and rebalance our hearts for a moment, holding those together, and so that we can move through the rest of the days and the rest of the weeks, providing support for all of those people, including ourselves, who need that support and that celebration. So we'll hold for a moment of silence. And ease yourself back into the space. Go as slowly as you need to bring your focus back into this space, knowing that your heart is fuller. And we will continue now with a reading from this book that I got at the library the other day, actually at the bookstore, called The Message, written by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I think this tradition of writing, of drawing out a common humanity, is indispensable to our future, if only because what must be cultivated and cared for must first be seen. And what I see is this. I see a figure standing at the edge of a sprawling forest, tasked with mapping that forest with such precision that anyone who sees that map will see themselves transformed into the territory. The figure, they can see the snowy peaks in the distance, and they might conjure some theories as to what lies between and beyond those peaks. Pine trees, foothills, a ravine with a stream running through it. The figure is you, the writer. An idea in hand, notes scribbled on loose leaf, maybe an early draft or an outline. But to write, to draw the map, to tell the story, to pull us into that wilderness, you cannot merely stand at the edge. You have to walk the land. You have to see the elevation for yourself, the color of the soil. You have to discover that the ravine is really a valley, and that the stream is in fact a river winding south from a glacier in the mountains. You can't know any of this beforehand. You can't logic your way through it, or retreat to your innate genius. A belief in genius is a large part of what plagues us. And I have found that people widely praised for the power of their intellect are as likely to illuminate as they are to confound. Genius may or may not help a writer whose job is, above all else, to clarify. The quality of light by which we scrutinize our lives has direct bearing upon the product which we live and upon the changes which we hope to bring about through those lives. It is within this light that we form those ideas by which we pursue our magic and make it realized. Audre Lorde said that. She was writing about poetry, but I think her words apply across all areas of writing. You cannot act upon what you cannot see. And we are plagued by dead language and dead stories that serve people whose aim is nothing short of a dead world. And it is not enough to stand against these dissemblers. There has to be something in you, something that hungers for clarity. And you will need that hunger, because if you follow that path, soon enough you will find yourself confronting not just their myths, not just their stories, but your own. And this is difficult, if only because so much of our own myth-making was done in service of liberation, in doing whatever we could to dig our way out of the pit into which we were cast. And above us stand those very people who did the casting, the jeering, the tossing soil into your eyes and yelling down at us, quote, "You're doing it wrong," end quote. But we are not them. And the standards of enslavers, colonizers, and villains simply will not do. We require another standard, one that sees the sharpening of our writing as the sharpening of our quality of light. And with that light, we are charged with examining the stories we have been told, and how they undergird the politics we have accepted, and then telling new stories ourselves. Ta-Nehisi Coates. Let us center ourselves again. You can remain seated for hymn numbered 123, Spirit of Life.
Blow
I hope you appreciate that I move away from the mic when I'm singing. I don't know. I'm not the best singer, but I want to hear Shayna. So I'm going to tell two stories this morning. The first is about one of our most famous American sculptors, prominent in the late 1800s. After attending university, this sculptor began selling small pieces, and their talent was quickly recognized. So, through connections with prominent benefactors of the day, this artist gained significant renown. And as their fame grew and grew, they also lived and worked in Italy with other famous artists and intellectuals. Ultimately, their sculpture was featured in many important exhibits and museums. So before I tell you the name of this sculpture, of this artist, I'd like you to visualize them. Please think about the first image that came to your mind of this person. I'm not asking you to guess who it is or to create some ideal image of who you'd like it to be. I just want you to think about whatever subconsciously just popped into your head about how this person may have looked. The second story is of America's most famous whiskey. Also in the 19th century, a master whiskey distiller developed something called the Lincoln County process. It is a sugar maple charcoal filtering method. That really sounds delicious. Sugar maple charcoal filtering method, used to this day to make most of our American Tennessee whiskeys. The whiskey that this distiller made became incredibly popular and is currently one of the top 2 best-selling American whiskeys a few hundred years later in the world. Once again, before I tell you this person's name, please consider the first visualization that came to your mind as I described them. Don't judge that image. Just think about it. What popped into your head when I talked about this person, if anything? I'm going to continue both of these stories a little later, but I want you to remember those initial images your subconscious created. Now, were I to hear these stories without knowing anything else about the people, the first images to my mind of both the sculptor and the whiskey brewer would have been of a white male. And I likely would have been right. My perception was shaped by how American history was taught to me and the preponderance of stories of our land and of our people that I was told, as well as the manner in which I've been conditioned by Western culture. Certainly, not everyone would have imagined that same image, the person that I popped into my head. But I challenge anyone to claim that white male would not be the predominant image, the predominant description that came to mind for most people. Due to colonialism and slavery and the violent subjugation of minorities in many forms, as I said, it is likely that success at that high a level of art or of business in the 1800s in this country would have been achievable almost exclusively by white males. The author Thomas King wrote, "The truth about stories is that that's all we are. And therefore, the stories we tell, as well as who tells the story, as well as how the story is told, as well as to whom the story is told, and so many more factors, must also dictate who we are. So it is incredibly unfortunate that many people in our country obfuscate and erase stories, even today, while embellishing or making up others out of whole cloth that suit a white supremacist narrative. For generations, so many stories of our country's African American and Indigenous American ancestors, among other marginalized peoples, have gone purposely undocumented, and those that are known, those stories that we do know, remain neglected for the most part in our public education. The honest narrative of our country's history, for which we must be accountable in order to move forward with the radical transformation necessary to repair this broken society, that honest narrative has been stolen and is being rewritten. Forces in power reject truths which paint them in a bad light, and then attempt to redirect the American narrative out of fear of losing that power. Even the stories of marginalized people that have managed to sustain a place in the public awareness have been and are currently being threatened with extinction. It is a startling reality that words of freedom from Frederick Douglass or thoughts about love from bell hooks could be disallowed from school classrooms and libraries? Or as one member told me today in Houston, they're trying to designate the true history as orally told by an indigenous tribe as fiction in a school. Our reading today was from Ta-Nehisi Coates' new book, The Message, as I said, both of which, the author and the book, are the victims of active banning attempts across this country. As controversial as some texts might be, it is only through open-minded engagement with controversy and with the stories of others, combined with respect for all truths, that we grow as a society. Now, I refuse to condemn this country to die from these viruses of fear and avoidance and disinformation that infect it. I refuse. A body can heal if there is an antidote to poison. A body can strengthen if that which supports it is nourished and reinforced. And there are certainly conditions, however, to that healing, to all healing. The body first must accept that it is sick. You can't heal from a disease you claim you don't have. It must then be willing to tolerate the discomfort and the side effects of an antidote, and often the deep pain and struggle over time, the inevitable accompaniment to strength restoration. And say there is deep pain and struggle accompanying the regaining of strength, as we know. The stories of African American and Indigenous Americans represent both that poisonous history of colonialism that is part and parcel to our American inheritance, as well as the powerful courage and resilience that is inextricable from our nation's history, even as hard as some may try to avoid and to deny it. These stories of our African American, Indigenous American ancestors, these stories, too long hidden and too often erased, must be told and retold and absorbed in order to reconstitute and heal a national body risking irreparable damage. And it's time to tell the full American story in all of its wondrous beauty and all of its tragic complexity. I'll start by finishing the stories I began at the beginning of this talk. You might have guessed that the famous sculptor I was talking about was not a white male. Her name was Edmonia Lewis, and she was also known by her Chippewa name Wildfire. This is Edmonia Lewis. Edmonia Wildfire Lewis was born of a black West Indian father and a Chippewa mother. She became the first professional BIPOC sculptor in the United States, and having lived and worked in Rome as well, the first to achieve international acclaim. In 1862, Edmonia Lewis was accused of poisoning 2 female white college students. And right before her trial, she was kidnapped, she was beaten, and she was left to die by a mob of white men. Despite this and many, many more trials and tribulations that were sine qua non, or an essential condition to being a person of color in a country that by law and by sentiment considered her less than human, she battled on to be an immense success. Certainly the names of many famous sculptors are not widely known. I couldn't tell you the names of many famous sculptors, but I could tell you some. And like her contemporaries, who I do know, Rodin, Degas, Picasso, her name should at least be recognizable outside of art circles. Given what Edmonia Lewis overcame to achieve success in this country, and within the mostly white and male highest echelons of the art world, her story should be told even before many of her contemporaries, who did not have similarly almost insurmountable obstacles to overcome. On to the story of the whiskey distiller. Whether you drink whiskey or not, you probably know, don't put it up yet, but you probably know the name Jack Daniel. Yeah? It is, in fact, Jack Daniel that I was referring to in my second story, at least peripherally. I say peripherally because although Jack Daniel started and ran the company that bore his name, he neither developed the popular Lincoln County process used to brew it or worked as the master distiller for it. That person was a black man named Nathan Nearest Green, known colloquially as Uncle Nearest, who's sitting here next to Jack Daniel. Born into slavery and emancipated after the American Civil War, Nearest Green was also the first African-American master distiller on record in the United States. Because the stories of African Americans were not regularly documented, according to what has been passed down mostly orally, Green taught his distilling techniques to Jack Daniel. And to his credit, Daniel not only hired Green as his company's first master distiller, by all accounts, Daniel considered Green as close as family and did not resent or misrepresent Green's place in his company. When asked, he would tell you who Green was and how much he owed to him. But even with Daniel's acceptance and admiration for Green, the culture and the economic facts of the era led him to put his own name on the label. Spirits in this country simply would not sell, especially at the time of his distillery's founding, if associated with the name or image of a black man. So it became Jack Daniel's. Green's story has recently been unearthed, however. You'll know this if you're a whiskey connoisseur, leading to another chapter being written. Because in 2017, Fawn Weaver, an African-American woman, founded Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey, the first retail spirit named after an African-American. It is the fastest growing whiskey brand in the United States, one of the fastest growing US companies, and it is recognized as the most successful black-owned distillery in the world. As of September 2019, it was sold in all 50 states and 12 countries, and in October 2022, a mere 5 years after its founding, it reached $100 million in sales. Yes. And the master blender of Uncle Nearest whiskey is Victoria Edie Butler, a descendant of Nathan Green. Yes. This is why we tell the stories. And she is the first recognized African-American female whiskey master blender, winning back-to-back Master Blender of the Year titles. I don't know who give those out, but anyway, in 2021 and 2022. Let's drink, yeah. I was going to actually buy some Uncle Nearest here, but they start at like $50 a bottle and go up to a few hundred, so I decided not to. Rather than sharing a charity today, I do leave you with a challenge. First, as Ta-Nehisi Coates and Audre Lorde instructed in the reading that I read, move away from the edge, that you're just at the edge looking, and experience these stories firsthand and viscerally and in a better light in order to clarify, in order to produce changes like what I have spoken about. Go to the museum, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, to see Edmonia Lewis's bust of Hiawatha. Go to the Walker Art Gallery at the National Museum's Liverpool in England to see her bust of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Or go to the Smithsonian to see the death of Cleopatra. And as you do, consider the mettle it took for Edmonia Wildfire Lewis to overcome what she did to create the massive marble sculpture and the courage it took to confront great oppression, including risks to her life, to do what she did and display the death of Cleopatra in the 1876 Philadelphia Centennial. And then buy and enjoy and share some Uncle Nearest whiskey in order to channel Nearest Green, an emancipated slave with immense knowledge who selflessly shared his vast expertise, knowing he would not be credited for the fruits of his labor because he was black, at least in his lifetime. And I challenge you further to do your own activism work by excavating a story and or centering a voice that has gone unseen, unheard, purposefully hidden or erased. In order to properly, as Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote, properly map that story, wander physically into its wilderness however you can, to the best of your ability, and centering the voices of those who experienced these things and who are the proper narrators of these stories. And then write about it. Write an essay, make a film, support someone who is writing an essay or making a film, or disseminate it in any way you can. If you know children that are assigned a history project for school, offer up what you have found to them. If there are books you find about your discovery, bring them to school libraries, to book clubs, and anywhere else that books are offered and are at risk of being banned. When you hear American history misrepresented, speak up and tell the story you found. There's a great need for untold and concealed stories to be uncovered and revealed to this country and to the world. And I was at our own book club just this week, and I was at my regular Saturday morning self-care session just this week. And I talked to people just this day, and am proud to say that our members are already doing this work. So thank you. In conclusion, if stories are all we are, as Unitarian Universalists, we want and need to be a people who center love around interdependence and equity and transformation and pluralism and generosity and justice. If stories are all we are, and as human beings, we want and need to support healing of our deeply divided society, then we are required to unearth and lift up stories like that of Edmonia Wildfire Lewis and Nathan Nearest Green that have been hidden, and to center the voices of storytellers that have been silenced for too long. That is why we must tell the stories. Oh, thank you.
Going along with our story about stories, I had a principal who had a sign behind his desk, and he said, "Growing old is just having more stories to tell." Now it's time for our offertory. One of the privileges of our free church tradition is to provide all the financial support for our many ministries from among ourselves. Generosity, therefore, is one of the spiritual values we recognize as central to our well-being. You are now invited to participate in the blessing of giving as the ushers come around to accept the gifts of the congregation. Thank you.
Clapped in church on Sunday morning, played the tambourine so well, used to issue out a warning. She'd say, "Billy, don't you run so fast, might fall on a piece of glass, might be snakes there in the grass." Grandma's hands, Grandma's hands soothed a local unwed mother. Used to ache sometimes and swell. Grandma's hands used to lift her face and tell her, she'd say, "Baby, Grandma understands that you really love that man. Put yourself in God's hands." Grandma's hands, Grandma's hands used to hand me a piece of candy. Grandma's hands picked me up each time I fell. Grandma's hands, boy, they really came in handy. She'd say, "Buddy, don't you whip that boy. What do you want to spank him for? He didn't drop no apple core." But I don't have Grandma anymore, and if I get to heaven, I'll look for Grandma's hands. Ooh.
Yeah. Let's clap all our hands. Thank you. Thank you so much. We're so lucky to have our Spirit of Life choir, and Shana and Severin and everyone else who's been a part of this, making this service happen. Thank you so much. We'll rise in body or spirit now for our closing hymn, number 1068, Rising Green.
My blood doth rise tides as they answer the moon, rushing on as a far distant sand. Winging my song is the wind of my breast, and my love blows over the land. And my love, and my love, and my love blows over the land. My foot carries days of the old into new. Our dreaming shows us the way. Wondrous our faith settles deep in the earth, rising green to bring a new day. Rising green, rising green, rising green to bring a new day.
If you'd like, hold the hands of the people next to you, or you can put your hands across your chest if you prefer. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences, beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together, in spite of time and death and the space between the stars. We pause in silent witness to that unity.
May the blessing of love be upon you. May love's peace abide with you. May love's presence illuminate your hearts, now and forever. So be it. Amen. Shalom, salam, namaste, and blessed be. And now our service truly begins. Please, after the postlude, join us for lunch. And also, I will be doing the Pacific Unitarian and Unitarian Universalist 101 introduction class in the library at about 12:30. So please join us there, whether you, 12 o'clock, at 12 o'clock, I'm sorry. Please join us there, whether you're new or not, in the library at 12 after you get some lunch. But our postlude will be a song called Why We Tell This Story from a wonderful musical called Once on This Island.